Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates spent weekends at the mall, she was at the shooting range with her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who taught her that precision mattered more than strength. Her steady hands and sharp eyes caught his attention early. But when Sarah announced her decision to join the Army as a sniper, the reaction was far from supportive. The recruitment office buzzed with nervous energy as young men and women signed their futures away. Sarah walked in wearing her father's old military jacket, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. The recruiter, Sergeant Thompson, looked her up and down with barely concealed skepticism. She was 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed barely 120 pounds soaking wet. When she expressed interest in sniper training, he actually laughed. "Sweetheart, maybe you should consider communications or medical corps," he said, sliding a different set of papers across the desk. "Sniping isn't really a job for someone like you." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "Someone like me, sir? Look, I'm not trying to be mean here, but you need upper body strength to carry that equipment. You need to be able to march 20 miles with a full pack. The rifle alone weighs 15 pounds before you add the scope and ammunition." She leaned forward, her brown eyes unwavering. "I can handle it, sir. I've been shooting since I was 8 years old. I can hit a target at 800 yards with iron sights." Sergeant Thompson sighed and shook his head. "Civilian shooting and military operations are two different worlds, kid. But if you insist on trying, I won't stop you. Just don't say I didn't warn you when you wash out in the first week." The paperwork took 3 hours to complete. As Sarah filled out form after form, she could hear whispered conversations from other recruits. A group of young men in the corner kept glancing in her direction, making comments just loud enough for her to hear. "Probably thinks she's some kind of action movie hero," one of them snickered. "Wait until she tries to low-crawl through mud with that gear." Sarah's best friend Maria had driven her to the recruitment center, and she waited in the parking lot, clearly worried about her friend's decision. When Sarah finally emerged with her signed papers, Maria immediately started her lecture. "Sarah, are you absolutely sure about this? You could go to college on that academic scholarship. You're smart enough to be a doctor or engineer. Why put yourself through this?" Sarah looked back at the building where she had just committed the next 8 years of her life to military service. "Because I need to prove something, Maria. Not to them, but to myself. I've always known I was meant for something more than what this town expects from me." The drive home was quiet, both girls lost in their own thoughts. Sarah stared out the window at the familiar landscape, knowing that in 6 weeks she would be leaving for basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. Her grandfather had trained there decades earlier, and she felt a connection to that legacy. At home, her parents' reaction was mixed. Her mother, Elena, had tears in her eyes as she hugged her daughter tightly. "Mija, I'm proud of you for following your dreams, but I'm terrified of losing you." Her father, Roberto, had served briefly in the National Guard and understood the military mindset better than most. He looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. "The military will test you in ways you can't imagine right now, Sarah. But if anyone can handle it, it's you. You've always been tougher than you look." That night, Sarah lay in her childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the long road ahead. She knew the recruiter's doubts were shared by many others. She was entering a male-dominated field where physical strength was often valued above precision and intelligence. But her grandfather had taught her something important during those long afternoons at the shooting range. The best weapon any soldier could have was the one between their ears. She pulled out her grandfather's old military journal, which he had given her years earlier. In it, he had written about his experiences as a young soldier, the fears and doubts that plagued him, and the brotherhood he found among his fellow troops. One passage stood out to her that night. "The measure of a soldier is not in their size or strength, but in their ability to complete the mission when everything goes wrong." Sarah closed the journal and made a silent promise to herself. She would not just survive sniper training, she would excel at it. And someday, when lives depended on her skills, she would be ready to prove that the doubters had been wrong all along. Basic training at Fort Benning hit Sarah like a freight train moving at full speed. The Georgia humidity made every uniform stick to her skin like a second layer, and the drill sergeant seemed to take particular pleasure in testing her limits. Drill Sergeant Williams, a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks, singled her out from day one. "Martinez, you think this is summer camp? Drop and give me 50. Sarah hit the ground without hesitation, her arms burning as she cranked out push-ups while her fellow recruits watched. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed relieved the attention wasn't on them. The worst part wasn't the physical punishment. It was the whispered comments from some of the male recruits who seemed to view her presence as a joke. "She'll never make it through sniper school," muttered Jake Phillips, a cocky kid from Alabama who bragged constantly about his hunting skills. "My little sister could probably outshoot her." Sarah kept her mouth shut and focused on the exercises. She had learned early that responding to provocation only made things worse. Instead, she channeled her frustration into performance. While other recruits struggled with marksmanship training, Sarah consistently scored in the top 5%. Her shots grouped so tightly that the range instructor, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, actually checked her target multiple times. "Martinez, where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My grandfather, sir. He taught me that every bullet matters." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Well, he taught you right. Keep this up and you might actually have a shot at sniper school." The physical training was brutal, but Sarah had prepared for that. What she hadn't expected was the psychological warfare. Some of her male counterparts seemed determined to prove she didn't belong. They would accidentally bump into her during formations, make crude comments just loud enough for her to hear, and spread rumors about special treatment she supposedly received. The breaking point came during week 4 of basic training. Sarah had been selected as squad leader for a field exercise, a recognition of her consistent performance and leadership potential. Jake Phillips and 2 of his buddies cornered her after chow, their faces showing clear resentment. "Listen here, Martinez," Jake said, stepping closer than regulation allowed. "We all know you only got picked because they need to fill some diversity quota. In the real army, nobody's going to care about political correctness when bullets start flying." Sarah looked him straight in the eye, her voice steady despite the anger boiling inside her. "When bullets start flying, Phillips, the only thing that matters is who can shoot straight. And based on your range scores, that definitely isn't you." Jake's face turned red with embarrassment. His marksmanship had been consistently poor, and Sarah's comment hit its mark. "We'll see about that, Princess. Sniper school is going to eat you alive." That night, Sarah called her grandfather from the base phone. His voice was a comfort after the long, difficult weeks of training. "How are you holding up, mija?" "It's hard, abuelo. Some of the guys here don't think I belong." Her grandfather was quiet for a moment. "You know, when I went through training, there was a kid from New York who thought us Mexican Americans couldn't fight. Said we were too soft, too emotional. You know what happened to him?" "What?" "He got sent home for failing his physical fitness test while I graduated with honors." Sometimes the loudest voices belong to the weakest soldiers. Don't let their noise distract you from your mission. The conversation gave Sarah renewed strength. She threw herself into training with even greater determination. During the obstacle course, she found ways to compensate for her smaller size with better technique and planning. While bigger recruits tried to muscle their way through challenges, Sarah used leverage and momentum to her advantage. Her breakthrough moment came during a night navigation exercise. The recruits were dropped in unfamiliar terrain with only a compass and map, tasked with reaching 3 checkpoints before dawn. Many of the male recruits, overconfident in their abilities, charged off into the darkness without proper planning. Sarah took her time studying the map and terrain features. She identified the most efficient route and moved methodically through the forest. While others crashed through the underbrush making noise, she moved like a ghost. Remembering her grandfather's lessons about patience and observation, she was the 3rd recruit to reach the final checkpoint, arriving just behind 2 much larger soldiers who had gotten lucky with their routes. But more importantly, she had completed the course without making a single navigation error, something only 2 other recruits accomplished. Drill Sergeant Williams pulled her aside afterward. "Martinez, that was outstanding work out there. You've got the kind of fieldcraft that can't be taught. It has to be in your blood." "Thank you, sir. I'm recommending you for advanced infantry training after graduation. And if you still want to try for sniper school, I'll put in a good word. But I need to warn you, what you've faced here is nothing compared to what's waiting for you there." Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of his words. Sniper school had one of the highest washout rates in the military. The physical demands were extreme. The mental pressure was crushing and the standards were unforgiving. But she had made it this far and she wasn't about to quit now. Sniper school at Fort Benning was a different world entirely. The moment Sarah stepped off the bus with 23 other candidates, she knew she was in for the fight of her life. The selection process had been brutal, whittling down hundreds of applicants to this small group. She was one of only 2 women who had made it this far. and the other had washed out during the first week. Chief Instructor Master Sergeant Davis was a legend in the sniper community. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, with over 40 confirmed kills to his credit. His weathered face showed the stress of years spent in combat zones, and his pale blue eyes seemed to see everything. When he looked at Sarah during the initial briefing, his expression was unreadable. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the most demanding course the United States Army has to offer. Over the next 10 weeks, we will push you beyond what you think is possible. 90% of you will fail. Some of you will quit today, some will quit tomorrow, and others will make it to week 8 before we send you home. The question is not whether you think you can make it. The question is whether you have what it takes when everything goes wrong." The physical demands started immediately. 5-mile runs in full gear became routine. Sarah's legs screamed in protest as she struggled to keep pace with soldiers who had longer strides and more muscle mass. But she had learned to use her smaller size as an advantage, finding energy efficiency that the bigger candidates couldn't match. The academic portion was equally challenging. Ballistics, meteorology, range estimation, and target identification filled their days. Sarah excelled in these areas, her natural aptitude for mathematics and her grandfather's early lessons serving her well. While other candidates struggled with wind calculations and trajectory planning, she absorbed the information like a sponge. But it was the practical training where she truly began to shine. The sniper rifle felt natural in her hands, an extension of her will and intent. Her shooting scores were consistently among the highest in the class, a fact that didn't go unnoticed by the instructors or her fellow candidates. Private Johnson, a former Marine from North Carolina, approached her after a particularly challenging day on the range. "Martinez, I got to admit I didn't think you'd last a week here. But you can flat out shoot? Where did you learn that?" "My grandfather taught me. He said shooting isn't about strength. It's about patience and breathing." Johnson nodded with newfound respect. "Well, he knew what he was talking about. I've been hunting since I was 6 and you're out shooting most of us." Not everyone was as accepting. Corporal Stevens, a candidate from the 82nd Airborne, seemed to take Sarah's presence as a personal insult. He made comments about social experiments and lowered standards whenever the instructors weren't within earshot. His shooting was adequate, but his attitude was toxic. The real test came during week 6 with the field training exercise. Candidates were paired up and given a mission to infiltrate enemy territory, locate a high-value target, and take the shot. Sarah was paired with Private Williams, a quiet soldier from Montana who had initially been skeptical of her abilities but had grown to respect her skills. Their target was a mannequin dressed as an enemy commander, positioned 800 meters away in a mock village. The catch was that they had to maintain position for 12 hours, observing the target area and waiting for the perfect shot opportunity. The instructors would test their camouflage, discipline, and ability to remain motionless for extended periods. Sarah and William spent hours preparing their hide site, using natural vegetation and camouflage netting to create an invisible position. Sarah's smaller size was actually an advantage here, requiring less space to conceal and making it easier to blend into the terrain. As the sun rose on the second day of the exercise, they had been in position for 18 hours. Williams was struggling with fatigue and muscle cramps, but Sarah remained focused on the target area. Her grandfather had taught her meditation techniques that helped her remain calm and alert during long periods of waiting. At 0847 hours, the target appeared in the window of the mock building, exactly as briefed. Sarah controlled her breathing, calculated wind speed and direction, and squeezed the trigger with perfect form. The shot was perfect, hitting the mannequin dead center in the chest. Master Sergeant Davis's voice crackled over the radio. "Excellent shot, Team 7. Clean kill, textbook execution." But their celebration was short-lived. An instructor appeared from nowhere, having been watching their position for hours without detection. "Outstanding hide construction and shot execution. However, Private Williams, your movement discipline needs work. I spotted you shifting position 3 times. Private Martinez, your camouflage and fieldcraft are exceptional. You remained completely invisible for the entire exercise." The praise from the instructors was rare and valuable, but more importantly, Sarah noticed a shift in how her fellow candidates treated her. The skepticism was being replaced by respect, and even some of the initially hostile candidates began to acknowledge her abilities. Corporal Stevens, however, remained resistant. After the exercise, he cornered Sarah near the barracks. Don't get too comfortable, Martinez. One good shot doesn't make you a sniper. When we get deployed, nobody's going to care about your feelings or your diversity points. They're going to expect results. Sarah looked at him calmly. Stevens, when we get deployed, the only thing that will matter is who can make the shot when it counts. And based on what I've seen so far, that's not going to be you. Stevens's face darkened, but before he could respond, Master Sergeant Davis appeared behind them. Is there a problem here? No, sir. Both soldiers responded simultaneously. Davis looked between them, his experienced eyes missing nothing. Good. Because in 3 weeks you'll be graduating, and I need to know that every soldier who leaves here can be trusted to watch their battle buddies back. Personal conflicts have no place in the sniper community. Am I understood? Yes, sir, they replied in unison. As Stevens walked away, Davis turned to Sarah. Martinez, you're performing at the top of your class. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Graduation from sniper school was bittersweet. Of the 24 candidates who had started the course, only 7 remained. Sarah had not only survived but graduated second in her class, earning the respect of instructors and fellow soldiers alike. The graduation ceremony was small but meaningful, with family members traveling from across the country to witness their loved ones receive the coveted sniper qualification. Sarah's parents and grandfather made the trip from Texas, their faces beaming with pride as she received her certificate and sniper badge. Her grandfather's eyes were moist as he hugged her afterward, whispering in Spanish, I knew you could do it, mija. Your grandmother would be so proud. Master Sergeant Davis pulled her aside after the ceremony. Martinez, you've earned something special today. Not just the qualification, but the respect of everyone who matters. I'm putting you in for assignment to the 75th Ranger Regiment. They need skilled marksmen, and you've proven you have what it takes. The assignment to the Rangers was both an honor and a challenge. The 75th Ranger Regiment was an elite unit with a reputation for taking on the most dangerous missions. Sarah would be one of only a handful of female soldiers in the entire regiment, and the first female sniper many of her new teammates had ever worked with. Fort Benning became her new permanent home as she joined Alpha Company 3rd Battalion. Her company commander, Captain Rodriguez, was a combat veteran who had served multiple deployments in Afghanistan. He was direct but fair in his assessment of his new sniper. Martinez, I don't care if you're male, female, or from Mars. What I care about is whether you can make the shot when American lives depend on it. Your instructors tell me you can. I'm going to take their word for it, but you'll have to prove it to the men you'll be fighting alongside. Her squad leader, Staff Sergeant Thompson, was a grizzled veteran with 2 Purple Hearts and enough combat experience to fill a book. He looked at Sarah's small frame with initial skepticism, but was willing to give her a chance based on her training scores. Martinez, I've seen a lot of snipers come and go over the years. Some were great shots but couldn't handle the pressure of combat. Others were tough as nails but couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. The best ones, the ones who keep their teams alive, they have both skills. We're going to find out which kind you are. Sarah's integration into the team was gradual but steady. Her spotter, Specialist Mike Chen, was initially disappointed that he had been assigned to work with the new girl. But after a few training exercises, his attitude completely changed. Damn, Martinez, you don't mess around, he said after watching her consistently hit targets at extreme range. I've worked with 3 other snipers, and you're already better than 2 of them. The training with the Rangers was intense beyond anything Sarah had experienced. Night infiltrations, live-fire exercises with minimal separation between friendly forces, and scenarios that pushed every soldier to their breaking point. Sarah found herself carrying equipment loads that seemed impossible for someone her size, but she refused to ask for help or special accommodation. During one particularly brutal exercise, the squad had to march 15 miles in full gear, then establish overwatch positions for a mock assault. Sarah's pack weighed nearly 70 pounds, and by mile 10, her legs were shaking with exhaustion. But she kept pace with the team, driven by determination and the knowledge that showing weakness would confirm every doubt her skeptics had voiced. Staff Sergeant Thompson noticed her struggle, but also noticed her refusal to quit. During a brief rest stop, he approached her quietly. Martinez, there's no shame in acknowledging physical limitations. Everyone has them. Sarah looked up at him, sweat streaming down her face. With respect, Sergeant, I didn't come this far to quit now. I can handle it. Thompson nodded, recognizing the steel in her voice. All right then. But if you fall out, you're done. No second chances in this unit. She didn't fall out. By the end of the exercise, she was exhausted but standing, having completed every requirement. More importantly, she had earned something from her teammates that couldn't be taught or demanded: their trust. The real validation came during advanced marksmanship training. The Rangers regularly trained with foreign Special Forces units, and during one joint exercise with British SAS, Sarah found herself in a shooting competition with some of the world's best marksmen. The targets were placed at increasingly difficult ranges and angles, with environmental factors like wind and elevation changes making each shot a complex calculation. Sarah's mathematical mind and steady hands gave her a significant advantage. Shot after shot, she connected with precision that impressed even the seasoned SAS snipers. Captain Williams of the SAS approached her after the exercise. "Bloody hell, Martinez, that was some of the finest shooting I've seen in 20 years of service." "Where did you train?" "Fort Benning, sir, and my grandfather's backyard in Texas." Williams laughed. "Well, remind me never to underestimate Texas grandfathers. Your country should be proud to have soldiers like you." Word of Sarah's performance spread quickly through the regiment. The initial skepticism was rapidly being replaced by recognition and respect. But Sarah knew that all the training exercises in the world couldn't truly prepare her for what was coming next. Captain Rodriguez called her into his office 6 months after she joined the unit. His expression was serious as he gestured for her to sit down. "Martinez, we just received deployment orders. The company ships out to Afghanistan in 3 weeks. This will be your first combat deployment, and I need to know you're ready for what we're going to face over there." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I'm ready, sir. The enemy doesn't care about your training scores or your qualification badges. They're going to try to kill you and everyone on your team. Are you prepared to take a human life if necessary?" The question hung in the air between them. Sarah had thought about this moment countless times during her training, knowing it would eventually come. "Yes, sir. I understand the responsibility and I'm prepared to do my duty." Captain Rodriguez nodded. "Good, because in 3 weeks we're going to find out if all this training was worth it." Afghanistan was like stepping into another world. The heat was oppressive, the dust got into everything, and the landscape was both beautiful and deadly. Forward Operating Base. Chapman in eastern Afghanistan became Sarah's home for what would be a 12-month deployment. The base was surrounded by mountains that provided perfect hiding spots for enemy fighters, making every patrol a potentially lethal encounter. Sarah's first few weeks in country were spent adjusting to the reality of combat operations. The training had been realistic, but nothing could truly prepare someone for the constant tension of knowing that any moment could bring contact with the enemy. Her team's mission was to provide overwatch and precision fire support for infantry patrols, operating in the dangerous valleys around the base. Her squad leader, Staff Sergeant Thompson, had been right about combat being different from training. The enemy fighters they faced were experienced guerrilla warriors who knew the terrain intimately and had been fighting foreign forces for years. They were skilled at using the landscape to their advantage, appearing and disappearing like ghosts in the mountains. Sarah's first combat mission came 3 weeks into the deployment. Intelligence had identified a high-value target in a village about 10 kilometers from the base. The mission was to establish overwatch positions and provide security for a raid by Special Operations Forces. Sarah and her spotter, Specialist Chen, were positioned on a ridgeline with a clear view of the target building. The pre-dawn insertion went smoothly, with the team moving through the darkness without detection. Sarah and Chen established their hide site among a cluster of rocks, using their ghillie suits and natural camouflage to blend into the terrain. From their position, Sarah had a commanding view of the village and multiple escape routes the target might use. As the sun began to rise, the village came to life. Women carried water jugs, children played in the dusty streets, and men gathered around a small tea shop. Sarah watched through her scope, identifying potential threats while being careful to distinguish between combatants and civilians. The rules of engagement were strict, and she knew that any mistake could have tragic consequences. At 06:30 hours, the Special Operations team moved into position around the target building. Sarah's job was to watch for enemy reinforcements or anyone trying to escape. The assault began with a flashbang grenade, followed by shouting in both English and local dialects as the operators cleared the building room by room. Suddenly, Chen spotted movement on a rooftop about 400 meters away. Sarah, I've got a possible shooter on the building with the blue door. He's got what looks like an AK-47. Sarah swung her rifle toward the target, acquiring the figure in her scope. The man was clearly armed and was moving into a position that would allow him to fire on the assault team. The range was well within her capabilities, but she needed to be absolutely certain of her target identification. "I see him," she whispered into her radio. Adult male, military age, armed with rifle, moving to firing position overlooking assault team. The radio crackled with the voice of the ground force commander. "Overwatch, you are cleared to engage if you have a clear shot." Sarah controlled her breathing, made final adjustments for wind and distance, and placed her crosshairs center mass on the target. Her finger moved to the trigger, applying steady pressure until the rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the valley. Through her scope, she watched the target drop immediately. There was no movement, no return fire, just the sudden stillness that confirmed a successful engagement. It was her first shot fired in combat, and her first confirmed kill. "Target down," she reported over the radio, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. The assault team completed their mission successfully, capturing the high-value target without casualties. During the debrief back at base, the Special Operations Commander specifically mentioned Sarah's contribution to the mission's success. "That Overwatch shot likely saved American lives today," he told Captain Rodriguez. "Your sniper showed excellent judgment and precision under pressure." But for Sarah, the moment was more complex than simple professional satisfaction. She had taken a human life, something she had trained for but never fully prepared for emotionally. That night she called her grandfather from the base communications center. "I did my job today, abuelo, but it's different than I thought it would be." Her grandfather's voice was understanding. "Taking a life is never easy, mija, even when it's necessary. It means you still have your humanity. The day it becomes easy is the day you need to worry." Word of Sarah's successful engagement spread through the base quickly. The initial skepticism that some soldiers had harbored about having a female sniper was rapidly disappearing. Her accuracy, professionalism, and composure under fire were earning respect from even the most traditional soldiers. Corporal Stevens, who had transferred to a different unit but was stationed at the same base, approached her in the dining facility a few days later. His attitude had changed completely from their time in sniper school. "Martinez, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you, and I'm man enough to admit it. What you did out there the other day was professional and precise. I'm glad you're on our side." Sarah appreciated the gesture, understanding how difficult it was for someone like Stevens to admit he had been wrong. "Thanks, Stevens. We're all here to do the same job and get everyone home safely." As the weeks passed, Sarah's reputation continued to grow. She completed mission after mission with the same precision and reliability that had characterized her training. Her small stature, which had once been seen as a liability, proved to be an advantage in many situations. She could fit into hiding positions that larger soldiers couldn't use, and her ability to remain motionless for hours made her nearly invisible to enemy observation. But Afghanistan was an unpredictable place, and Sarah knew that her biggest test was still ahead. The enemy was learning to adapt to American tactics, and the fighting was becoming more intense as her deployment progressed. The real measure of her abilities would come when everything went wrong and lives hung in the balance. That test would come sooner than she expected. In a valley where the mountains seemed to close in on all sides, and the enemy had every advantage except one, they didn't know that Sarah Martinez was watching over her fellow soldiers with the patience of a hunter and the precision of a master craftsman. The mission that would define Sarah's military career came during her 8th month in Afghanistan. Intelligence had identified a Taliban commander who was responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces throughout the region. The target was holed up in a compound in the Korangal Valley, an area so dangerous that soldiers called it the Valley of Death. The operation required a complex insertion involving multiple units. Sarah's team would establish overwatch positions on the surrounding ridgelines, while infantry squads moved through the valley floor to assault the compound. The terrain was treacherous, with steep slopes, loose rock, and limited escape routes if things went wrong. Captain Rodriguez briefed the team on the mission's complexity. "This target has been responsible for over 30 coalition casualties in the past 6 months. He's smart, well-armed, and has home field advantage. We expect heavy resistance, and extraction could be complicated if the weather turns bad." Sarah studied the terrain maps and satellite photos with the intensity of a student preparing for final exams. The compound was situated on a hillside with natural defensive positions and multiple escape routes. Her assigned position would give her overwatch of the primary approach routes, but the range would be challenging even for someone of her abilities. The insertion began at 200 hours under a moonless sky. Sarah and Chen moved through the darkness with night vision goggles, carefully picking their way up a steep slope that seemed to go on forever. Each step had to be placed carefully to avoid dislodging rocks that could alert enemy sentries to their presence. By 4:30 hours, they had reached their assigned position, a rocky outcropping that provided excellent concealment in fields of fire. Sarah established her hide site with the practiced efficiency of months of combat experience, while Chen set up his spotting scope and communication equipment. The view from their position was both spectacular and ominous. The valley spread out below them like a natural amphitheater, with the target compound visible as a cluster of buildings about 800 meters away. Sarah could see movement around the compound, confirming intelligence reports that the target was well protected. As dawn approached, the assault teams moved into position. The plan called for a coordinated attack from 3 directions, with Sarah providing overwatch and precision fire as needed. Everything seemed to be going according to plan until the enemy sprang their trap. The Taliban had been expecting an attack and had prepared accordingly. As the assault teams approached the compound, machine gun fire erupted from concealed positions throughout the valley. The American forces found themselves caught in a deadly crossfire with limited cover and nowhere to retreat. "Contact! Contact!" crackled over the radio. "We're taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Request immediate support." Sarah could see the chaos unfolding below through her scope. American soldiers were pinned down behind rocks and in shallow depressions, unable to advance or retreat. The enemy had positioned their fighters expertly, using the terrain to maximize their advantage. "I can see at least 4 enemy positions," Chen reported, scanning the valley with his spotting scope. "Machine gun nests at 2 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and 9 o'clock from our position. There's also a sniper in the bell tower of the compound." Sarah began engaging targets methodically, her rifle cracking with measured precision as she eliminated enemy fighters one by one. Each shot required careful calculation of range, wind, and elevation, made more difficult by the stress of watching American soldiers under fire below. Her first target was the machine gunner at the 2 o'clock position. The range was 650 meters with a slight crosswind from the east. Sarah adjusted her scope, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. Through her scope, she watched the enemy fighter drop, his weapon falling silent. "Target down," she reported, already shifting to the next threat. The battle raged for over an hour, with Sarah providing critical fire support that allowed the assault teams to maneuver and eliminate enemy positions. Her accuracy was phenomenal under the circumstances, with each shot finding its mark despite the pressure and complexity of the situation. But the enemy had one more surprise waiting. As the assault teams finally reached the compound, a hidden enemy sniper opened fire from a position that hadn't been identified in the pre-mission intelligence. The enemy marksman was skilled and well-positioned, and his first shot wounded the assault team leader. "We've got a sniper in an unknown position," came the frantic radio call. "He's got us pinned down and we can't locate him." Sarah scanned the area frantically, looking for muzzle flash or movement that would reveal the enemy sniper's position. The shots were coming from somewhere on the opposite ridge, but the exact location remained hidden. Chen spotted him first. "Sarah, I think I see him." Ridgeline, about 200 meters, behind the large boulder with the dead tree next to it. 1,200 meters was an extremely long shot, especially in the mountains where wind patterns were unpredictable. Sarah had made shots at that distance during training, but never in combat with lives hanging in the balance. She studied the target area through her scope, finally spotting a glint of metal behind the boulder Chen had identified. The enemy sniper was well concealed, with only a small portion of his rifle and scope visible. It would require a perfect shot to neutralize the threat. "I see him," Sarah whispered. "This is going to be a challenging shot. Range 1,200 meters, elevation difference about 300 feet, wind variable from the west." Below in the valley, the assault team was still pinned down. The wounded team leader was losing blood and medical evacuation was impossible, as long as the enemy sniper controlled the high ground. Every second counted. Sarah made her calculations, adjusting for the extreme range and environmental factors. The shot would require perfect trigger control and timing. She had to wait for a lull in the wind and fire at the exact moment when all variables aligned. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate despite the adrenaline. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. "Patience, Mija. The rifle knows when you're ready." The wind died for just a moment. Sarah placed her crosshairs on the barely visible target and applied steady pressure to the trigger. The rifle fired with its familiar crack, the sound echoing across the valley. Through her scope, she watched the enemy sniper's rifle tumble from his position, followed by his motionless form. The shot had been perfect, striking the target center mass despite the extreme range and difficult conditions. "Target down," she reported, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what she had just accomplished. The assault team immediately began moving again, no longer pinned down by the deadly accurate fire from the opposing ridge. Within minutes, they had secured the compound and captured the high-value target they had come for. As the dust settled and casualty reports came in, the full scope of Sarah's contribution became clear. She had eliminated 7 enemy fighters during the engagement, including the sniper who had threatened to turn a successful mission into a disaster. Her shooting had been nothing short of exceptional. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the radio, filled with unmistakable respect. "Overwatch, outstanding work today. Your precision fire support made the difference between mission success and catastrophe." The extraction went smoothly, with helicopter support arriving to evacuate the wounded and extract the assault teams. As Sarah and Chen made their way back to the landing zone, Chen shook his head in amazement. "Martinez, that was the best shooting I've ever seen in combat. That 200-meter shot was impossible, but you made it look routine." Sarah felt the weight of what had happened settling on her shoulders. She had proven herself beyond any doubt, silencing every critic and skeptic who had questioned her abilities. But more importantly, she had kept her fellow soldiers alive when everything had gone wrong. During the debrief, the captured Taliban commander revealed information that led to the disruption of multiple planned attacks against coalition forces. The mission had not only been successful, but had likely saved countless American and Afghan lives. Word of Sarah's performance spread rapidly through the military community in Afghanistan. The female soldier who had been mocked for her small stature and questioned for her presence in a male-dominated field had just completed one of the most impressive sniper engagements of the entire war. But for Sarah, the real validation came in a different form. As she walked through the base that evening, soldiers who had never spoken to her before nodded respectfully. These weren't gestures of political correctness or forced acceptance. They were the genuine recognition of one warrior by another. The doubters had been silenced, not by arguments or policies, but by performance under fire when it mattered most. The final months of Sarah's deployment passed in a blur of successful missions and growing recognition. News of her extraordinary marksmanship had reached the highest levels of military command. Generals who had never heard of the small-town girl from Texas were now reading after-action reports that detailed her precision and professionalism under the most challenging circumstances. 3 weeks before her scheduled return to the United States, Sarah received an unexpected visitor at Forward Operating Base Chapman. Brigadier General Patricia Hayes, one of the highest-ranking female officers in the Army, had flown in specifically to meet with her. "Specialist Martinez, I've been following your career with great interest. Your performance here has been nothing short of exceptional, and I wanted to personally thank you for your service." Sarah stood at attention, still somewhat amazed that a general would take time from her schedule to visit a single enlisted soldier. "Thank you, ma'am. I've just been doing my job." General Hayes smiled. "I think you and I both know it's been considerably more than that. You've proven that excellence knows no gender, and you've opened doors for the women who will follow in your footsteps. The Army needs soldiers like you, and I hope you'll consider making this your career." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with General Hayes sharing her own experiences as a woman in the military and discussing the changes she had witnessed over her decades of service. For Sarah, it was both inspiring and humbling to realize that her individual performance had broader implications for military policy and culture. Word of the general's visit spread quickly through the base, cementing Sarah's reputation as something special. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Corporal Stevens, who had been her harshest critic during sniper school, approached her in the base exchange a few days later. Martinez, I heard about the general's visit. I wanted to say something before you head home. Stevens looked uncomfortable, struggling with words that didn't come easily. I was wrong about you. Not just a little wrong, but completely wrong. You're a better soldier than I'll ever be, and I'm sorry for the way I treated you. Sarah extended her hand, which Stevens shook gratefully. We all make mistakes, Stevens. What matters is learning from them. The flight home seemed surreal after 12 months in a combat zone. As the transport plane lifted off from Bagram Airfield, Sarah looked down at the Afghan landscape one last time. The mountains that had been both beautiful and deadly were fading into the distance, along with a chapter of her life that had transformed her from a hopeful recruit into a proven warrior. The homecoming at Fort Benning was overwhelming. Her parents, grandfather, and Maria were waiting at the airfield, along with local reporters who had gotten wind of her story. The small-town girl who had left for basic training 3 years earlier was returning as a decorated combat veteran, with a reputation that extended far beyond her unit. Her grandfather's embrace was the longest and most meaningful. You did it, mija. You proved them all wrong. No, abuelo, Sarah replied, her voice thick with emotion. I proved you right. Everything you taught me, every lesson about patience and precision, it all mattered when it counted. The media attention was unexpected and somewhat uncomfortable. Sarah had never sought recognition or publicity. She had simply wanted to serve her country and prove that she belonged. But her story had resonated with people across the nation, particularly young women who saw in her an example of what was possible with determination and skill. During a television interview a week after her return, the reporter asked her about the moment that had defined her deployment. What went through your mind during that 200-meter shot that saved your fellow soldiers? Sarah thought for a moment before answering. I wasn't thinking about proving anyone wrong or making history. I was thinking about the wounded soldier on the ground and the teammates who were counting on me. That's what being a soldier means, doing your job when others are depending on you. The interview generated national attention, with calls for Sarah to receive military decorations and recognition for her service. The Army responded by awarding her the Bronze Star with Valor Device, one of the highest combat decorations possible for her actions in Afghanistan. But perhaps the most satisfying recognition came in a different form. 6 months after her return, Sarah received a letter from a young woman in Ohio who had seen her story on the news. Dear Specialist Martinez, I'm a senior in high school, and I've been thinking about joining the military but wasn't sure if I was tough enough. After seeing your story, I know that strength isn't just about size or gender. It's about heart and determination. I'm planning to enlist after graduation and hope to earn my way into sniper school just like you did. Thank you for showing me that it's possible. The letter was one of dozens Sarah received from young women across the country who had been inspired by her example. She realized that her individual achievement had become something larger, a symbol of possibility for an entire generation of female soldiers. 3 years later, Sarah was promoted to sergeant and assigned as an instructor at the Army Sniper School at Fort Benning. Standing in front of a new class of candidates, she looked out at faces that included several young women who had been inspired by her story to pursue the demanding training. Welcome to Sniper School, she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had proven herself in the crucible of combat. Over the next 10 weeks, we will push you beyond what you think is possible. Some of you will doubt whether you belong here. Some people may tell you that you don't have what it takes. But I'm here to tell you that the only opinion that matters is the one that comes through your rifle scope when lives are on the line. As she continued the briefing, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The recruitment office where she had been dismissed, the drill sergeants who had doubted her, the fellow soldiers who had questioned her presence. All of it had led to this classroom where she was now training the next generation of America's most elite. Marksman, the girl from Texas, who had been mocked for her small stature, had become a symbol of excellence and determination. But more importantly, she had opened a door that could never be closed again, proving that skill, courage, and dedication were the only qualifications that truly mattered on the battlefield. In the end, the doubters had been silenced not by arguments or policies, but by the simple, undeniable truth that came through the radio that day in Afghanistan. Target down.